Welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be looking at market research.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it's something that,
Yeah.
we hear about a lot, but maybe we don't know exactly, what it is or all that it entails.
Yeah, kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Mm.
so we found this really cool article on Indeed.com. It's the UK version of the website.
Okay.
And it's all about interview questions and answers for market researchers.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, if you're interested in getting into the field,
Yeah.
these are some of the things you might be asked about.
Gives you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of what the job would actually be like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that jumped out at me right away is that, analytical skills are super important.
Oh, for sure.
Data interpretation
Yeah.
and communication
Yeah,
skills,
you got to be able to talk about the data.
right? Because, like, what good is it if you can analyze all this stuff, but then you can't explain it to anybody?
Yeah, and you got to be able to tell a story with the data.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Make it make sense to people who maybe aren't, data experts.
Right. Like if I'm working with a company that wants to launch a new product, I can't just hand them like a spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers on it. I've got to be able to say, okay, this is what this means for you. This
Mhm.
is who your target audience is. This is how we think they're going to react to it.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Um, so I thought it was interesting too. They get into some like specific questions that you might be asked in an interview. And one that I thought was kind of interesting is like, how do you handle unfavorable findings?
Oh, that's a good one.
Because that's got to happen sometimes, right?
All the time.
Where you're like, okay, well, the data says this, but it's not what, the client was hoping for.
Right. And that's where the ethics of market research come in.
Right.
You've got to be objective. You've got to present the facts, even if they're not pretty.
Totally. Yeah. And they're not going to like what you have to say sometimes,
Exactly.
but you gotta be, honest and upfront about it.
And professional.
You're professional.
Yeah.
And then I also noticed there was some stuff in there about like the actual tools and software that market researchers use.
Oh, yeah.
Like they mentioned SPSS, Qualtrics,
Mm-hmm.
Google Analytics.
Yeah, those are some of the big ones.
So it seems like you kind of need to have some like technical skills as well.
Definitely. I mean, SPSS, for example, that's a statistical analysis software. So, we use that to crunch numbers, look for trends, that kind of thing.
Wow. So you're like really getting into the nitty gritty of the data there.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating.
And each tool has its own purpose. Like Qualtrics is great for surveys. And Google Analytics, well, everybody knows Google Analytics. It's for understanding website traffic.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
all about having the right tool for the job.
Yeah. It seems like you need to be pretty tech savvy to do this kind of work.
You do have to be comfortable with technology, that's for sure. But it's not just about the tools. It's about knowing how to use them to answer the right questions.
Right. Yeah. So I noticed in like the frequently asked questions section, they talked about some of the challenges of market research.
Oh, yeah, there are definitely some challenges.
Yeah, like keeping up with, rapidly changing markets.
Right. Things are always changing.
And then just like dealing with massive amounts of data.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially with, the internet and social media and all the data that's out there now.
Right. And then also just communicating that data to people who aren't, experts in the field.
Yeah, that can be tough. Trying to make it understandable and relatable.
Right. But it sounds like a really interesting field.
It is.
If you like problem solving.
Yeah, if you like to dig into data and figure things out.
Yeah. And like you were saying, tell a story with it.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
there's also the human element, too.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask you about that because they had this little anecdote in there about like dealing with resistant respondents.
Oh.
Like, what do you do when you're trying to, do a survey or something and people just don't want to talk to you?
Well, sometimes you get people who are just, not interested. Or they're suspicious. Or they're just busy.
Right.
So you have to be able to build rapport. Explain why your research is important.
Yeah. Like, why should I care?
Exactly.
And make them feel comfortable enough to share their thoughts.
Right.
Huh.
It's all about communication.
Yeah. Wow. So it's like a lot more than I thought it was.
It is. It's a really multifaceted field.
Yeah. We've covered a lot of ground already,
We have.
from the analytical skills to the technical tools to the ethical considerations.
That's the human element.
And the human element, exactly.
It's all connected.
Yeah. Well, this is super interesting.
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot.
Me too.
So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll dive even deeper into this world of market research.
Sounds good.
All right, see you in a few minutes.
Okay.
All right, so we're back, And we were talking about the different types of market research.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to ask you more about.
Okay.
They mention quantitative and qualitative research.
Yeah, those are like the two big buckets.
Okay.
I have a feeling those are important.
They are very important.
Yeah.
So quantitative research, that's all about numbers.
Okay.
So like surveys, polls, experiments,
Gotcha.
anything where you're collecting numerical data and then analyzing it to find trends.
So, like, if you wanted to know, how many people in a city prefer Coke over Pepsi,
Exactly.
you would use quantitative research.
Exactly.
Okay. And then what about qualitative research?
So qualitative is more about the why.
Okay.
So it's less about the hard numbers and more about understanding people's motivations and opinions and experiences.
So, like, why do people prefer Coke over Pepsi?
Exactly.
Okay.
Or why do they choose a certain brand of car? Or why do they shop at a particular store?
So you're really trying to get inside their heads.
Exactly.
And, like, figure out what's driving their decisions.
Right.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and qualitative research usually involves things like focus groups and in-depth interviews.
Okay, so you're, like, really talking to people one-on-one.
Or in small groups.
Or in small groups.
Yeah.
And just, like, really trying to dig deep.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. They also mentioned something about sampling methods.
Oh, yeah, that's super important too.
I was kind of wondering, like, how do they choose who to talk to?
Right.
Because you can't talk to everybody.
No, you can't talk to everybody. So you have to choose a sample of people that is representative of your target population.
Okay, so, like, if you're doing a study on, I don't know, millennials,
Yeah.
you're not going to go interview a bunch of baby boomers.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. So there are different ways to choose your sample. Like you can do random sampling, which is where everyone in the population has an equal chance of being selected.
Oh.
Or you can do stratified sampling, where you divide the population into subgroups based on certain characteristics, like age or gender or income level.
Okay.
And then you make sure that your sample includes people from each of those subgroups.
So it's like a more targeted approach.
Exactly.
Okay, I see. One thing I was thinking about is, like, with all this data that they're collecting,
Yeah.
like, how do they make sure to protect people's privacy?
That's a really important question. And it's something that market researchers take very seriously.
Okay.
So there are a lot of ethical guidelines and regulations in place to ensure that data is collected and used responsibly.
Okay, good.
So for example, participants in a study always have to give their informed consent,
Okay.
which means they have to understand what the study is about and how their data will be used.
Right.
And they have to agree to participate.
Right. And then the data itself is often anonymized,
Okay.
which means that any personally identifiable information is removed.
So you can't tell who, from...
Okay, that makes sense. And then, you were mentioning before about AI and how it's changing the field of market research.
Oh, yeah. AI is having a huge impact.
I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Okay.
So, for example, AI can be used to analyze huge amounts of data very quickly,
Okay.
much faster than a human could ever do it.
Right.
And it can identify patterns and trends that we might not even notice.
Wow. So it's like having a superpowered research assistant.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. And so how are they using AI, like, in practice today?
So one example is sentiment analysis,
Okay.
where AI can analyze things like social media posts and online reviews
Okay.
to understand how people feel about a particular brand or product.
So, like, are they positive or negative?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it can even pick up on subtle nuances in language
Wow.
that might indicate a certain emotion or opinion.
So it's like AI is reading between the lines.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and then those insights can be used to, improve products or develop better marketing campaigns.
Okay, so it's like AI is helping market researchers to really understand what consumers want.
Exactly.
And then they can use that information to create products and services that people will actually buy.
Right.
Okay, that's really cool. We've talked a lot about the technical side of things, but I'm also curious about, like, what makes a good market researcher?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Like, what are the skills and qualities that they need to have?
Well, obviously, analytical skills are important,
Right.
but it's not just about being good with numbers.
Oh.
You also need to be curious,
Okay.
creative,
Okay.
and you have to have a genuine interest in understanding human behavior.
So it's like being a detective a little bit.
Yeah, kind
Like
of.
you're trying to solve a puzzle.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool. Wow, this deep dive has been really insightful.
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot.
Me too.
So is there anything else from the article that you think we should touch on?
Yeah, actually there is. There was one more point that I thought was really interesting.
So is there anything else from the article that you think we should touch on?
Yeah, actually there is. There was one more point that I thought was really interesting. It was about how, you know, We tend to think of market research as something that only affects businesses,
Right.
but it actually has a huge impact on us as consumers, too.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm starting to see it everywhere now.
Hmm.
Like all the ads that we see, the products that are available in stores, even the way that those products are marketed to us.
Exactly. All of that is influenced by market research.
Wow. It's like it's all around us,
It
and we
is.
don't even realize it.
Yeah, we're constantly being influenced by it, whether we're aware of it or not.
So it's like market research is kind of shaping our reality in a way.
I think that's a fair statement.
Wow. Well, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive.
I'm glad you found it interesting.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about market research, and I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to it now.
I think that's the key takeaway. Just being aware of the influence that it has on our lives.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And to all of our listeners out there, stay curious.